Welcome back to another reading and correcting of Stepping Up by me, Kindar, the Tiger Rights and Time. The Tiger Supervisor. Today we are doing chapter 35, and of course I'm going to start. The colored hexagonal wow. The colored hexagonal floor tiles were mostly hidden by rats and bunnies, waiting for Tibs to step into the room. Among the the colored hexagonal floor tiles were mostly hidden by the rats and bunnies, waiting for Tibs to step into the room. Among the also numerous rats and rattling and bunnylings. Behind them, between the two far pillars, stood a bigger brute, flanked by a big brute on each side. The rats and bunnies were new here, I said. I gave up on the stuff that's written down, she replied. They mentioned the increase in rattling and bunnylings, but nothing about the rest. We need to clear them, Jekyll said, tone grave. Just kick them out of your way, I said. They can't do anything to you when you're stoned. He looked at the fighter. Are you okay? For all his bravado, Jekyll had nearly died. The smileless friend gave him with force. I'm fine, he looked at Mez. And I want them dead so they can't heal that big brute. That's too unfair. Bigger brute, Dick's corrected reflexively. Jekyll. You know what? And Jekyll decides. You're not Jekyll. Because Jekyll is all about fighting fair. Having the odds in my favor is what makes what a fair fight looks like. Jekyll's grin faded as he looked the room over. We don't have to fight them, Tish said and squeezed Jekyll's arm. His friend squared his shoulder. There's loot to get. Tibs, Trina said, getting his attention before he could object. Her essence took shape over her hand. This is what the essence for the whirlwind looks like. He gave Jekyll a concerned look before focusing on the essence. We need to watch him, he said, watching it move, or he's going to do something stupid. That's the best description of our team leader. For our team leader, she replied with a smile. Don't worry, we won't let him die. Now, pay attention. The essence moved and interlocked in ways that, while unfamiliar, didn't look difficult to recreate. He tried, but ended up with something not quite like hers. He had the motion and the interlocking. The problem was the form of the essence itself. This was fuzzy around the edges again, while hers was sharp, precise. Sharp, precise. Was sharp. I think, much like how she wrote letters. All clear lines and each one always the same. While Tibs' letters were a mess, and he couldn't always tell if two were the same. Two of them were the same. She said he'd get it with time and practice, but Tibs wasn't sure. Letters were just so not his thing. He looked at his essence again. Was it fuzziness because he wasn't getting it, or was it just like writing letters? Each person wrote them in different ways. Was that part of what Alistair meant when he said how they thought about essence affected how they used it? Did his teacher even know what that meant? Or was he simply repeating something he didn't thought? Could Tibs not recreate the whirlwind because his etching wasn't as precise? Susser calls this kind of etching spells, she said. Can all etching move like that? My teacher only showed me two I have to do with a knife. It depends on... Hate to break the lesson, Jekyll said, but we have a room to clear. I'll practice it later, Tibs said. Wasn't sure he'd be able to do it now, not with the little he knew about it. He joined Jekyll at the threshold, taking both air knives in hand. We'll clear as many of the rats and bunnies as we can before going after the lings, Jekyll said. Then it's the lings who die, and after that, the smaller golems, the big brute gets to be the last, if at all possible. That sounds a lot like a strategy, Jekyll, I said. Careful, or we're going to start thinking you're a competent leader. A smile cracked Jekyll's stern expression, then was gone. Are we ready? The others nodded, and the fighter stepped into the room. Tibs threw his knives as he stepped across, guiding them to cut rats and bunnies. When one got stuck, Tibs put more essence in getting it out of the bunny, but all it did was unravel the essence he'd used to control it. When the second one got similarly stuck in a ratling that had been getting too close, Tib let it go and switched to water blast, keeping his other knife coated with fire for when anything got too close. Fire and air exploded through the room, sending rats and bunnies flying, along with the ling caught in the blast. There were so many explosions that Tibbs was surprised he only felt a slight heat or wind from them. He hadn't expected the size of the room to feel that. A dozen of the ling retreated to the golems, while the others threw themselves at attacks meant to stop them. Stop them from to the golems, while the others threw themselves at attacks. Oh, I see. Right. The attacks. Okay, threw themselves and enters. Need to stop them. The attack. Threw themselves at the attack, taking the hits. There. I think that's gonna be clear. When the room fell quiet, it was the five of them on one side and the golems and ling on the other, and rubbles in between. They saw an air knife and used the quiet time to try to pull it back to him. But even with only rubbles over it, he couldn't get the essence to pull it free. Another thing to add to the never-diminishing list of what he had to practice or figure out. He hated not being able to ask questions. This is unfair, Jekyll growled as Tibbs went to pick up his knives. Then they... You know what? I don't need that. Kimdo spoke after a few seconds of stillness. Must we cross another threshold before they will? The big brutes step forward, accompanied by half the lings. That will be a note, then. Tibbs, you and Kumdar thin the lings as best as you can. They're probably there to heal the brutes. Yes, Karina, take out anything you can, but especially lings trying to join this fight. He marched to meet the brutes, ignoring Karina's call to stop. Tibbs exchanged a look with his friends. There was no keeping Jackal from this fight, only making sure he survived it. Tibbs threw the air knives as he moved forward and to the side, forcing the lings to defend against them until he could kill two of them, losing their use in the process. Tibbs threw the air knives as he moved forward and to the side. It's going to be this, I think, forcing the lings to defend against them until he... I don't need a could. Until he killed two of them, losing the knives. Control of the knives in the process. Then he flung water at them in the ground, sliding around on it. Only barely controlled his movement. He was getting the hang of. He lost his footing. He planted a knife in the ratling's foot, coming down at him before rolling away. The next knife he planted in the side of a bunnyling's. Then he threw one at the back of a ratling heading for Kingdar, who was scattering lings with the sweep of his staff. Out of knives, he pulled a short sword. Another thing he needed to adjust was range. Then use a sword if he had one, and only use knives to throw after that. No wonder Jekyll ran in and hit stuff. It was a lot simpler. He blocked a rattling swing, cut a bunnyling, stuck the club from a club. stopped the club from taking his head off, but that sent the sword flying out of his hand. Cursing, he backed up as the two still before him followed. Were they grinning, expecting an easy victory now that he was weaponless? Tibs was a runner with essence. He was never weaponless. He pulled air essence and formed a pattern, and had shown him something almost like it had to do something. Yeah. Ah, something almost like it had to work anyway. All right. He flung it at the two lings, and the only result was the fluttering of the rags they wore. Fire? He hesitated. He couldn't get one started, but they were stone, not flesh, and fire was more effective when coated a weapon with it, which he didn't have. His back hit the wall. Earth? He could. The rattling attacked, and Tibs didn't think. He raised his arm to block, adding water to ice it. Some of it splashing and becoming solid into a shard as ice caught up to it. He ignored the pain in favor of the idea that formed. He shouldered the bunnyling and got pain as a result, but those claws scratched ice and leather instead of his skin. It also gave him some space, and he let the water drip into his hand. He flicked it and iced it as the water stretched. He smiled, as he was now holding a wicked-looking weapon made of ugly, jagged points and edge. It crinkled as it finished turning into ice, the points glittering in the light. Tib's smile fell when, instead of stepping back at the sight, they attacked as if he was holding a spoon. He joined them. Slashing, stabbing, then was cut and slashed in return. It didn't get through his armor, but it made him realize he'd gotten too close. The point of a sword was to keep his enemy far enough claws couldn't reach him. Training. He needed more training. He faltered as he realized Payan wouldn't be there to complain about training him, and was brought back into the fight with teeth in his blocking arm. With a scream, he stabbed the ratling through and flung it away, and slashed the bunnyling's head off. He met up with Kumdar, and they took down a last ratling. They have been made stronger, the cleric said, panting. He had more cuts and bruises. It was a good thing they'd all healed before this fight. It's what the dungeon does, Tibs replied, forcing his breathing to slow. Jackal was fighting a big brute, while Carino and Nez kept the other from joining in. Stowe had been surprised by how strong they were, and Tibs hadn't expected him to be ready for it this quickly. He figured their next run would have been the hard one. Tibs sensed the golems. Unlike people, the essence in them didn't match the inside of their body, so he couldn't tell the level of injuries they received. All he could assess was that Jackal's opponent had less of it left than the one being kept away. He felt the change in that golem just before he pushed through Carino and Mez's attack to reach the other. Tibs cursed, not picking up a knife as soon as the fight had ended. But he held a sword. He moved before the question of if a sword could replace a knife, or if one made of ice even qualified as a sword. It had a point. That was what mattered right now. He etched the X and poured all the water essence he had left in the attack. Kumdar caught him as it exploded forward, shattering the brute. He absorbed the sword to have enough to stand on his own and watch Jackal punch the other golem into pieces. He used the time to draw essence into his reserve. When Jackal joined them, his stall's skill was cracked, as was the essence underneath, but the fighter didn't seem to notice. It was about to heal my golem? Jackal asked. I figured so. Why else forced through the barrage? He didn't voice what he felt, but when the essence had shifted into the golem's body, moving to its in the hand, Stowe already had too many advantages. Not that I'm complaining, I said, looking at the back of the room, but is anyone else worried that the big brute didn't join into the fight? He looked at Jackal. Did you surprise a dungeon by having a strategy? I doubt it, Tibs said, wondering more about why Stowe wasn't commenting. In other rooms, you'd think the dungeon was busy with something else, but this was the boss room. He had to be. The bigger brute raised a hand, pointing at Jackal. You, Stowe said in Tibs' mind. Damn it, why can't I get that to work? He sighed. Tibs? Tibs snorted in his teeth. stared at him. Come on, Tibs. Still said, if this is serious. They're getting your wish, he told Jackal. That's the dungeon calling you out. You mean I got a one-on-one fight with the dungeon? Jackal asked gleefully. I don't see it bringing anything else to that fight, Trina said. We've killed all the creatures here. Tibs put a hand on the floor and sent earth essence. He relaxed when he felt no tunnels there. She's right, no other creatures. How do you wish to handle this? Asked the leader. Oh, I'm fighting it. Wouldn't it be better if we just blasted it? Ness asked, slightly exasperated. We get the loot and leave. You're hurt. Jekyll looked down at himself and seemed surprised at the cracks on his exposed stomach. Carino handed him a vial. How about it, Dungeon? You think it's fair for me to heal? Just take it and drink, Carino ordered. I thought you didn't fight fair. I'm not going to tell the Dungeon that, Jekyll protested. I believe it is too late. Condor said, you have recounted many of your times in the pits while we were in the dungeon. It knows quite well that you cheat. I don't care that he cheats, Still said smugly. Jekyll toasted the dungeon and drank the potion. Tibs sensed the fighter's essence react to the potion. The cracks filled with something that became the same as his essence as the stone skin smoothed over. Was that part of what was part of the potion that caused that to be effect? Tibs couldn't tell. Yet another question he couldn't ask. Jekyll stepped toward the golems. No holds bar, he stated. This ends when one of us is in pieces. Of course, Still said, but Tibs stayed silent. If it looks like you're about to lose, Bess said, aiming a flaming arrow at the golem, I'm blasting it. Jekyll stopped and turned to face them. No. Yes, Tibs and Kierna replied. I'm sorry, Tibs said to Stowe, but I'm not letting you kill him just because of his ego. I understand, Tibs replied, still smiling. If you have to rescue him, it means I won. Tibs, I have to do this, Jekyll said. Ignore the fighter. You are not dying. I'm going to beat it, Jekyll reassured him. Then you don't have to worry about us. Fighter sighed in defeat and continued toward the golem. Okay, Stowe said as Jekyll came to a stop before the golem. Tibs, when we say so, Jekyll struck the golem in the featureless face, then the chest, then the shoulders. On the fourth punch, it raised its arm, but was too slow to block it. Then its punch staggered it back, cracking the chest. The golem swung, but the fist went wide. Jekyll watched it, then punched the arm, cracking it. A foot in the chest sent the golem stumbling back. Is that all you have? Jekyll taunted. Stowe sighed. This is a lot harder than you all make it look. The golem rolled out of the way, and Jekyll landed on the floor with enough force. The tile cracked. I don't know why they ended up with it. The golem swept the leg, but Jekyll jumped out of the way. It was up before he could strike again. It still moved slowly, but there was precision to the movement now. You stopped controlling it, Tibs said. I thought it would be easy, since I'm the one who instructed BB on how to move and fight, but knowing how to do it isn't the same as doing it. Jekyll grabbed the punch, twisted it until the arm broke, and used that to strike it in the head. The arm shattered. It shattered its knee with a kick, caught it as it fell, and ripped the head off before it hit the ground and broke off into rubble. He turned his back to it, dusting his hand off. Okay, Dungeon, why did you leave? You could tell? Tibs asked as Stowe stammered in surprise. I fought it before. It nearly killed me. I remember how my opponents fight. Barely knew how to move when we started. Then it was back to being a decent fighter. But I already had the advantage. You didn't know how difficult fighting was, Tibs said. Jekyll nodded. So next one's going to be better? I really like him, Stowe said. It will, Tibs confirmed. Good, Jekyll turned. Now, onto the loot. Tibs rummaged through the rubble for coins. Really? Kenny demanded angrily, and Tibs looked up. I'll leave for a few minutes, and you pull this again? Nez held a black robe for Commodore to look at. You went pouting, Stowe snapped. And I didn't do anything. You expect me to believe that a black robe with metal and darkness woven through it just happened to be in the chest, as if the chest... Whoops. To be in the chest for... As if it was random? Still finished. That is a thing, you know. After everything you've done for them, you expect me to believe you? Believe whatever you want, Gammy. Still was annoyed. This is me. I decide what happens. You're only here to help. You're only here to help me. You bossing me around is really getting old. And yes, this is random. It's not my fault the cleric's willing to wear sorcerer's robe. It's not like I've had cleric's robe to work with yet at this point. There's a friend. Tibs' friend is the only one of them willing to brave me. She didn't reply. Still sighed. Yeah, you go sulk. You go and sulk again. Tibs hesitated, but curiosity got the better of him. What have you been doing for us? Nothing. She's blowing things out of proportion. I warned you for saving my life, and now, anytime something happens in your team's favor, it's me cheating. She keeps bringing up those mysterious they and how they aren't going to let me get away with this. Well, I'm not seeing any they, and until they step into me to try and tell me what I'm supposed to do, I'm in charge. She doesn't like that, and she doesn't like that I'm not the ignorant dungeon she first met anymore. Maybe you can let her help more? She designed the entire third floor. Seemed to catch his breath and sounded slightly calmer when he spoke again. How much more am I supposed to let her help with? Why is she acting like it's my fault if I learned what she taught me? Still didn't want advice, Tibs realized. He didn't know what advice to give. Talking to her didn't seem like a good idea at this time. Hopefully, they'd resolve the issue because Tibs had sensed Genny couldn't leave. He handed the coins he found to Karina and stepped around the chest and sensed the wall. He found what he was looking for perfectly behind the chest, just like how it was arranged on the first floor, except the chest was within the stairwell and the door opened by itself. The shape was the same as the entrance in the pool room alcove. In the pool room alcove. As was the set of essence filament. He used fire this time, putting it into the hollow of the hollow one and making a single thread. The wall shimmered. Shimmered with golden light. Because it's void, gold is kind of the motif I want to keep. And Tibs was looking at the hallway leading to the exit. That's going to be useful, Tickle said, carrying a piece of metal chest armor over his shoulder. Now we don't have to worry about that puzzle. That puzzle. The puzzle that deactivates the triggers on the bridge. On the bridge, he stepped through. With a curse, Tibs looked the way they'd come. He'd forgotten about the cache in the pool. What? Jekyll asked in his two-eye voice, and Darnmaz at his side. Did we miss something? Tibs almost told him, but realized Jekyll would insist they go back for whatever was in it. Tibs had enough for now. He shook his head. Karina stepped through and looked at him. Tibs? She asked in a deep voice. Tibs turned his back to the opening and, because he couldn't leave without at least trying, whispered, Talk with her? She's your friend. Don't let a bad mood ruin that. Find out why she's scared and angry and help her with that. Still didn't respond, so Tibs stepped through the opening and headed for the exit with his friend. And it's conclude chapter 35 of Stepping Up. If you are enjoying this, leave a like. If you want to know when the next one is going to be, subscribe and hit the bell. If you want to support me, I have a Patreon where you can get access to everything I've written. There's even an exclusive series to it. The link is in the notes. And if you want to read this slightly ahead, possibly, and for free, you can do that on Royal Road. The link is also in the notes. And with that, I shall wish you a good day.